The snow fell in sheets so thick that the headlights of Ezra Caldwell's armored SUV barely carved 3 feet through the dark. The wipers beat a frantic rhythm against the windshield, and the GPS had gone silent 4 minutes ago. Dead signal, dead road, dead world. Ezra gripped the wheel and said nothing. He never said anything that wasn't necessary. Then he saw it. A flash of red, brilliant, impossible red against the blinding white. He hit the brakes. The SUV fishtailed, found grip, stopped. Ezra stared through the glass for one full second, a second that would later feel in memory like the last moment of his old life, before he shoved open the door and stepped into the storm. She was face down in the snow, arms splayed, a red scarf wrapped around her neck and flung sideways by the wind. One of her boots had come half off. Her car, a dented Civic with a cracked rear bumper, sat at a 45-degree angle in the ditch 30 yards back, hazards blinking their dim orange heartbeat into the dark. Ezra crouched. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck and felt a pulse faint but there. He pulled off his glove and pressed his palm to her face. Her skin was ice. He said, very quietly to no one, "I swore I would never let anyone in again." Then he picked her up and carried her to the car. 48 hours earlier. Ezra Caldwell did not believe in mercy. He believed in margins. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Caldwell Industries, 63rd floor boardroom, looking down at a city that moved like machinery, and he listened to the Hartley Group's lead negotiator deliver a merger proposal worth $4.7 billion. The man had been talking for 11 minutes. Ezra had made his decision in the first 40 seconds. "No," Ezra said. The room went very quiet. "Mr. Caldwell." The negotiator adjusted his tie. "The Hartley Group is the single largest clean energy distributor in the Northern Hemisphere. This merger would dilute my controlling share by 22%, insert 3 of your board members into my executive structure, and require me to reroute my grid expansion plans through your approval committee." Ezra finally turned from the window. His face was calm in the way that deep water is calm, still on top, enormous pressure below. "I didn't build Caldwell Industries to manage it by committee. No. Sir, the financial models alone. I've seen your financial models. Your Q3 projections assume a regulatory environment that doesn't exist anymore. Tell your people I said good luck." He was already walking toward the door. "Gerald, see them out." His assistant, Gerald, a small, perpetually anxious man who'd been with Ezra for 6 years without once being praised in public, scrambled to usher the stunned Hartley delegation toward the elevator. In the hallway, Ezra's CFO, Dominic Reeves, fell into step beside him. Dominic was the kind of handsome that came from expensive dentistry and a personal tailor. He had the easy smile of a man who believed charm was a form of currency, and the sharp eyes of a man who never actually spent it on anyone but himself. "You know the Hartley deal was a guaranteed windfall," Dominic said. "Guaranteed is for people who can't do math," Ezra said. "The board is going to push back." "The board can push back from their yachts. That's what I pay them to do." Dominic paused at the elevator. "Ezra, the Millfield Power Grid contract, our timeline is already behind. If we don't close a major partner in the next 30 days, we're going to have to walk away from the bid entirely." Ezra stopped. He turned and looked at Dominic for a long moment. "Then we don't sleep for 30 days. I'll drive up to the Millfield site tonight. I want eyes on the terrain before the storm hits." He didn't wait for Dominic to respond. 340 miles away, in a windowless university office that smelled of printer ink and cold coffee, Dr. Zara Mensah was being told that her research no longer mattered. "The Kellner Foundation has withdrawn the grant," said her department chair, Professor Ellis, who had the permanent expression of a man delivering news he'd already emotionally processed without consulting anyone else. "Effective immediately." Zara sat very still, They withdrew it. They've chosen to redirect their environmental research, funding toward projects with more industry-compatible applications. Industry-compatible. Zara repeated the word slowly, the way you repeat something in a foreign language to make sure you heard it correctly. Professor Ellis, my research proves that the Millfield Valley aquifer system would be destroyed by the proposed grid corridor. My data is solid. I've run it 4 times. Your data is not in dispute, Zara. Then what is? He cleared his throat. The Kellner Foundation has significant investment ties to Caldwell Industries, who holds the Millfield grid bid. They requested minor modifications to your projected impact models. You declined. I declined to falsify my findings. They preferred to characterize it as. I know how they preferred to characterize it. Zara stood up. She was not a tall woman, but she had the kind of stillness that made a room feel smaller around her when she was angry. So I'm being defunded because I won't lie for a billionaire who has never once set foot in Millfield Valley. The Foundation's position. I know their position. She picked up her bag from the floor. I'll clear my equipment by Friday. She walked out of his office, down 3 flights of stairs, and out into a sky that had gone a deep, troubled gray. The weatherman had called for a light dusting. The sky was not consulting the weatherman. She sat in her car in the parking lot and called her mother. The call went to voicemail. She called her lab partner, Kezia. Same. She sat with her phone in her lap and looked at the gray sky and thought about 4 years of work, 4 years of 3 a.m. data sets, of driving out to Millfield in her dented Civic with a soil testing kit in the trunk, of presenting at conferences where she was the only black woman in the room and 3 different men had asked if she was with catering, and she pressed her lips together and said out loud, "No, absolutely not. Not today." She started the car and drove north. The plan was simple: drive to Millfield, collect her field equipment from the research station before the storm made the roads impassable, and find somewhere to regroup. A friend from her undergrad had a place in Calder, 40 minutes past the valley. She'd sleep on the couch, eat whatever was in the fridge, and figure out what came next in the morning. The storm had different plans. It descended without warning, or rather, with exactly the kind of warning that requires good phone signal to receive, which Zara did not have by the time the first real squall hit. The Civic's back end slid on a patch of black ice 3 miles past the Millfield turnoff, and in the 3 seconds it took her to correct, overcorrect, and slide sideways into the ditch, she had time to think exactly one coherent thought. The heating stopped working last Tuesday. She sat in the tilted car for what felt like 5 minutes but was probably 2. Then she got out, assessed the situation, axle buried, no traction, no signal, no visible houses, wrapped her red scarf tighter around her neck, and started walking toward the lights she thought she'd seen on the hill before the road curved. She made it approximately 3/4 of a mile. She didn't feel herself fall. One moment she was walking, and the next she was lying in the snow and her hands were very far away and the lights on the hill looked very beautiful, and she thought, with clinical detachment, that this was probably hypothermia setting in, and then she stopped thinking entirely. She woke up furious. It was a delayed fury. First there was warmth, then light, then the ceiling, which was not the ceiling of anywhere she'd ever been, and then a slow realization that she was in a bed that cost more than her car, wearing someone else's thick socks, with an IV drip in her left arm and a heart monitor she hadn't consented to attach to her right index finger. Then the fury arrived. She had pulled the heart monitor off and was working on the IV tape when the door opened. "I'd leave that in," said the man in the doorway. Ezra Caldwell. She recognized him the way you recognize someone from a wanted poster, not a person you've met, but a face you've studied, because understanding the enemy requires knowing what they look like. He looked like every profile picture she'd ever seen of him, except in the photographs he was always in a suit, and right now he was in a dark Henley and gray trousers, and he was holding a coffee cup. And he was watching her with an expression that was trying very hard to be clinical detachment and failing slightly. "You're in my estate's medical wing," he said. "Your core temperature was 92 degrees when I found you. The doctor has been and gone. She said you need fluids and warmth and rest. The roads are closed for approximately 48 hours. So," he said the word like punctuation, "you're here until they're not." Zara looked at the IV, looked at him, looked at the room. "You stored me," she said. He blinked. It was, she would learn, the closest he came to showing surprise. "I beg your pardon." "You found me. You brought me back here. You had your staff dress me and stick me with wires and park me in this room." She pulled her knees up. "Like furniture you weren't sure where to put." The silence that followed was approximately 3 seconds long and felt considerably longer. "You were dying in a snowdrift," he said. "And now I'm not dying in a very expensive room that I also didn't choose to be in." She looked at him levelly. "I'm not ungrateful for being alive. I'm pointing out that you made every decision about my body and my location without asking me a single question. You were unconscious. And then I was, and you still haven't asked me anything." Another pause. His jaw moved slightly. "Are you in pain?" he said. "No." "Are you hungry?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "Yes," she admitted. "Then I'll have the kitchen send something up." He turned to leave. "Ezra Caldwell," she said. He stopped. "I know whose house this is," she said. "I know who you are, and I know what your Millfield power grid is going to do to the Millfield aquifer system because I've spent 4 years measuring it." She watched the back of his neck. "I was defunded today for saying so out loud. So yes, I'm hungry, and yes, I'm grateful to be warm, and no, I don't want to be here any longer than I have to be. But I'm not going to pretend I don't know what kind of man I'm sitting in the house of." He turned back slowly. "What kind of man is that?" he asked. "The kind," she said, "who builds profitable things and calls them good." Food arrived 20 minutes later. By the time she'd eaten and the IV was done, the roads were confirmed impassable and the storm was worsening. The estate's head of security, a woman named Tors, showed her a guest suite and handed her a change of clothes. A Caldwell Industries executive sweatshirt that Zara looked at for a long moment before putting on, deciding that being warm was more important than being principled about sweatshirts. She found his study at 11 o'clock at night because the hallways were lit and she wasn't sleeping, and the suite was beautiful but silent in the way that expensive things are silent, not peaceful, just empty. The study was enormous and smelled like wood smoke and old paper. 3 walls were bookshelves. The 4th was a whiteboard, and across the whiteboard, across every inch of it, were blueprints, hand-annotated, color-coded, covered in calculations. The Millfield power grid. She stood in front of it for a long time. "You're going to get fingerprints on the calculations." She turned. Ezra was in the armchair by the fire with a laptop, watching her. "Your corridor routing misses the entire western shelf of the aquifer," she said. "You push through here," she pointed, not touching, "and you're into the primary recharge zone by kilometer 3. You won't see contamination immediately. You'll see it in 8 years, maybe 10. And then the town of Millfield will have no water." The environmental impact assessments were conducted by a firm that Caldwell Industries has a consulting relationship with. She turned to face him. "I have 4 years of independent field data that says your assessments are wrong. I had 4 years. I was defunded this morning, very possibly by people connected to you, so that data would stop being relevant." Something moved in his face. Something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite recognition. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." "I'd rather you sat down and showed me what you're talking about, but if you'd rather stand and talk at my whiteboard, that's also acceptable." He set the laptop aside. "I don't have relationships with the Kellner Foundation. They have relationships with you. Those aren't the same thing, but they're close enough." if what you're telling me about the aquifer is accurate. It is. Then why is no one else? Because I'm a black woman in environmental engineering who can't keep her grant funding and drives a car that belongs in a museum, and the people who have the power to amplify my research have financial reasons not to. She said it without heat, without self-pity, the way you state a thing that is simply true. I'm not asking you to feel bad about it. I'm asking you to look at the data. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up, crossed to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. "Show me," he said. She didn't sleep that night, neither did he. She talked through her research for 2 hours, pulling up papers on his laptop, sketching diagrams on the whiteboard, retracing field measurements. She'd memorized the way other people memorize song lyrics. He asked questions, real questions, precise questions, the kind that told her he understood exactly what she was saying. He pushed back twice and was wrong both times and acknowledged it both times without theatrics. It was, she thought, around 1 a.m., the first real intellectual conversation she'd had in months. Somewhere around 2 a.m., while he was annotating a section of the blueprint with her revised corridor mapping, he said without looking up, "Why Millfield specifically? You said 4 years. Most PhD candidates rotate field sites." She was quiet for a moment. "My mother grew up in Millfield Valley. Her family's been there 3 generations. The aquifer feeds the town well if it goes." She paused. "She'd have nowhere to go back to." He looked up from the whiteboard. He said nothing, but he wrote something down. She asked much later, just before dawn crept under the curtains, "Why does it matter to you? You could reroute, but that adds cost, and cost is—" "My father built a company," Ezra said. He said it to the fire, not to her. 30 years, power infrastructure across 4 states. His business partner of 20 years convinced him to sign over 49% of the equity as part of an expansion deal, framed it as a partnership. 6 months later, the partner restructured, diluted my father's stake to under 15%, and removed him from the board of the company he built. He paused. "My father died 2 years later. He never recovered from it, not financially, not," another pause, "not any other way." The fire crackled. "So you decided never to trust anyone," Zara said. "I decided to be precise," he said, "about everything, about who gets access to what I've built." "That's a very expensive way to grieve," she said gently. He looked at her then, and she held his gaze and didn't look away, and the fire was very warm, and neither of them said anything for almost a minute. Then he picked up the marker and said, "If we reroute through the northern shelf, what does your drainage model look like?" And they went back to work. The snowcat arrived at 9 a.m. Zara was at the kitchen table with her 3rd coffee, and Ezra's annotated blueprint spread around her laptop when she heard the sound, the grinding engine of something heavy coming across the snow. She looked out the window and saw a tracked vehicle pulling up to the front entrance. She watched Dominic Reeves climb out, dressed like a man who expected to be photographed. Immaculate coat, polished boots, a smile that arrived several seconds before the rest of his face had decided whether to be genuine. She had not met him before, but she knew the type. She went back to her coffee. She heard his voice in the entrance hall, loud and assured. She heard Ezra's voice, lower, measured. She heard footsteps approaching the kitchen, and then Dominic was in the doorway with Ezra 2 steps behind him. And Dominic looked at Zara sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by Ezra's blueprints with an expression that moved in less than a second from surprise to assessment to condescension. "Ezra," Dominic said without looking away from Zara, "I didn't realize you had," a fractional pause, "company." "Dr. Mensah's car went off the road in the storm," Ezra said. "She's been here since last night." "Of course," Dominic smiled at Zara. It was the smile of a man telling someone that their presence is being graciously permitted. "I hope Tors has been taking good care of you." "Tors has been fine," Zara said. "The coffee is excellent." "Wonderful." He turned fully to Ezra, dismissing her with the movement. I've come in person because we have a problem. The Millfield grid contract window closes in 18 days. I've been in conversation with a group called Meridian Capital who are prepared to fund the full build-out in exchange for a 40% stake. The numbers work. The timeline works. I need your signature on the term sheet by tonight to hold the offer. Ezra was quiet. What are Meridian's infrastructure plans for the corridor? Standard build, Dominic said. Same routing we've had approved. The approved routing is wrong, Zara said. Dominic turned to look at her with the particular patience of a person who considers themselves very busy. I'm sorry, he said, and you are in terms of the project exactly. She's a PhD candidate in environmental engineering who has 4 years of field data on the Millfield Aquifer, Ezra said. Her research indicates our corridor routing will destroy the primary recharge zone. A silence. Ezra, Dominic said, and his voice had changed. The warmth was still there, but it had the quality of a shell now, something the real voice was living inside. We've had environmental impact assessments. Done by Kellner-adjacent consultants, Zara said. She pulled up a data set on her laptop and turned it to face the room. This is 3 years of groundwater pressure mapping. This line, she tapped the screen, is what happens to the aquifer if you push through with the approved corridor. It's not opinion, it's data. Dominic looked at the screen. He looked at Ezra. He looked back at Zara with an expression that had given up the pretense of warmth entirely. Ezra, he said, a word privately. They went to the study. Zara stayed with her coffee and did not try to listen through the door, but the house was quiet and the study door was old and the voices came through anyway. Dominic's voice. She's a nobody. A broke PhD student whose funding just got pulled. She has every reason to fabricate data that makes your project look bad, because if your project fails, suddenly her research matters again. Ezra's voice. Her methodology is clean. I looked at it last night. You looked at it last night. You're not a hydrologist. Neither are your consultants. They're infrastructure contractors with a financial relationship to the project outcome. Ezra, a pause. Something deliberate in Dominic's voice now, the tone of a man playing a card he's been holding for a while. This deal is too important to be derailed by a woman who wandered in from a snowdrift. You have a company to run. You have a board to answer to. Don't let what? Ezra's voice had gone very level. Say the rest of it, Dominic. Silence. I'll sign the term sheet after I've reviewed the aquifer data with an independent hydrologist, Ezra said. Get me names by tomorrow morning. The study door opened, and Ezra came back to the kitchen alone. He stood in the doorway and looked at Zara for a moment. Thank you, he said, for this morning. She nodded. Where? He went to make calls. 20 minutes later, Zara went to retrieve her field notes from her bag, which Tors had put in the guest suite closet. She was halfway down the east corridor when she heard Dominic's voice from the small sitting room at the end of the hall. Dr. Mensah. She stopped. He was standing in the sitting room doorway, his phone in one hand and his coat already back on, the image of a man about to leave and willing to spare 60 seconds. I'm going to be direct with you, Dominic said, because I respect directness. Go ahead, she said. You're in a difficult position, unfunded, shut out of the academic infrastructure you need to publish your research and actually do anything with it. He paused. I have access to a private research endowment, independent of Kellner, independent of Caldwell. It funds environmental research across 11 universities. I could get your project fully funded within 2 weeks. New data, new publication, your own lab within 18 months. Zara looked at him. And all I'd need, Dominic continued, is for you to go back to your university, complete your PhD, and leave the Millfield project to the people whose domain it actually is. The room was very quiet. How much? She asked. Something shifted in his expression, a subtle ease, a door swinging open. "The full endowment for your research area. We're talking $2 million over 5 years." "$2 million," she said. "It's not a small offer." "No," she said, "it's not." She held his gaze. "Can I have 24 hours to think about it?" "I need an answer before the road's clear," he said, "which, based on the forecast, is approximately 6 hours," she said. "I'll have an answer in 6 hours." She walked back to the guest suite. She sat on the bed and opened her phone and pulled up the voice memo app. She looked at the recording that had been running since the moment she heard Dominic say her name from the sitting room doorway. 47 seconds of crystal clear audio. She sat with it for exactly the time it took to finish her coffee, and then she stood up and went to find Ezra. She found him in the study, staring at the whiteboard. She set her phone on the desk in front of him and pressed play. She watched his face as he listened. She had expected anger. What she saw was something more complicated, a kind of stillness that preceded enormous movement, the way the air goes completely calm right before a very serious storm. He listened to the recording twice. Then he picked up his own phone and made 3 calls in the next 4 minutes. She didn't follow the details. The calls were rapid, precise, in the language of people who move large amounts of money very quickly. What she did understand was the tone of a man who has been waiting for a specific type of information for a long time and has now received it. He put the phone down. "Dominic has been funneling project cost data to Meridian Capital," Ezra said. "Not just recently. For 8 months. They've been positioning to make this offer the entire time. He needed the Millfield deal pushed through before I had time to do a full independent review." He paused. "Your data was the variable he didn't account for." "Because he assumed I'd take the money," Zara said. "Because he assumed you were like everyone else," Ezra said. He looked at her then, a look that was not assessment, not analysis, just something straightforward and a little unguarded. "Why didn't you?" he asked. $2 million is real. Your situation is real." "Because I've spent 4 years proving something true," she said. "And because my mother's town is sitting on top of the thing I've been trying to protect." She picked up her phone. "You can't pay me enough to forget either of those things." The board meeting happened by video link at 11 o'clock that morning. 12 faces on a screen. Dominic was not among them. Ezra stood in front of the camera with the Millfield blueprints behind him. The new ones, the revised corridor routing, Zara's data sets printed and annotated in the margins. And he told the board that the Meridian Capital deal was dead, that Dominic Reeves was being removed from his position effective immediately, and that the company's legal team would be in touch with Dominic directly, and that Caldwell Industries was taking the Millfield grid bid in a new direction. "The new direction," he said, "involves a partnership with an environmental engineering researcher whose work on the Millfield aquifer system represents the most accurate independent analysis of the region's groundwater infrastructure that currently exists. The revised corridor routing will add 14% to the build cost and 6 weeks to the timeline. It will also ensure that the town of Millfield has access to clean water for the next 100 years, which is, I would argue, relevant to the long-term viability of our project." One board member said, "Ezra, the margin." "I'm aware of the margin," Ezra said. "Get me an independent hydrologist by Friday. The routing stands." He closed the video link. In the silence that followed, with the snow outside beginning to ease for the first time in 36 hours, he turned to look at Zara, who was sitting across the study with her coffee and her laptop and a very carefully neutral expression. "You didn't have to say that," she said. "Say what?" "The 100 years part. You could have said environmental compliance, and it would have been enough." "Environmental compliance is a minimum," he said. 100 years is a standard." She looked at him. He looked at her. Something in the room had changed, not dramatically, not with music swelling from nowhere, but in the quiet way that a thaw happens, which is not a sudden thing but a slow release of something that has been held very tight for a very long time. "I have to go back," she said. "I know. My research still needs to be published. My grant still needs to be reapplied for. I have a dissertation to finish." "What?" "I know," he said again. Whatever this was, she gestured between them, not quite accurately describing whatever this was, it was a blizzard. It was 48 hours. "Yes," he said. She packed her bag. Tours arranged for a car service to take her back to the university once the main roads were cleared, which would be another 2 hours. She waited in the guest suite and worked on her laptop and told herself the strange ache in her sternum was just leftover cold, just residual exhaustion, just the particular feeling of having been through something unusual. At 1:15 p.m., Tours knocked on the suite door and said the car was ready. Zara came down the stairs with her bag to find Ezra standing at the front entrance. He was holding something, not flowers, not a card, not anything sentimental. It was a laminated badge on a lanyard and a set of keys on a plain ring. "The badge is a partner access credential for Caldwell Industries research facilities," he said. "The keys are for a laboratory space at the Millfield Field campus. It doesn't exist yet. The building is scheduled to break ground in March." He paused. "We need a research director for the aquifer monitoring program, someone independent, someone whose data I can trust." She looked at the badge, she looked at the keys, she looked at him. "You're serious," she said. "I don't make non-serious offers." "This isn't a job," she said slowly. "You're a partnership," he said. "You keep your independence. Your data stays yours. Your name is on the program. I provide the infrastructure." She took the badge. She turned it over in her hands. "You realize," she said, "that this is exactly the kind of arrangement your father's partner used to get access to what your father built." "I know," he said. "That's how I know it's right this time, because I'm the one offering it instead of maneuvering for it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Dr. Mensah, director of Millfield Aquifer Research," she said. "It's not terrible." "No," he said, "it's not." She put the lanyard around her neck. Outside, the sun had come through for the first time in 2 days, and the snow on the estate grounds was doing what snow does when it's been holding its shape for as long as it can, releasing, shining, running in thin, bright lines through the white. Not gone, not warm yet, but moving. Zara Mensah and Ezra Caldwell walked out through the front entrance together and stood for a moment at the gate, the exact spot where he had found her in the dark, where she had been face down and red-scarfed and almost lost, and the sun hit the melting snow and the whole world was briefly, unreasonably beautiful. "I'm going to be very difficult to work with," she said. "I'm aware," he said. "I'm going to challenge every assumption you have about the project. That is precisely why I'm hearing you. And if you ever try to go around my data, I won't." She looked at him sidelong. He looked back, and the thing that lived behind his eyes, the thing that had been ice for a very long time, had changed. Not gone, but changed. "Okay," she said. The car was waiting. She walked toward it, and he stood at the gate and watched her go, the red scarf bright against the white world, moving until it was. If this story kept you here until the very end, you already know what to do. Hit that like button right now, and let the algorithm know this one was worth it. And if you want to be there when Zara walks into her brand new lab for the first time and Ezra shows up pretending it's a routine site visit, subscribe and turn on notifications, because that chapter is coming and it will not disappoint. Drop a comment below and tell me the truth. When Dominic made that offer and Zara asked how much, did you think she was going to take it? Because I need to know how many of you lost faith for a second. See you in the next one.